ends today, and a new year begins tomorrow at midnight. So we're on the cusp this morning. And I want to encourage you to take this opportunity to nurture your soul. Now, Anna Quinlan says, people don't talk about the soul very much anymore. It's so much easier to write a resume, she says, than to craft a spirit. But a resume is cold comfort on a winter's night, or when you're sad, or broke, or lonely, or when you've gotten back the chest x-ray and it doesn't look so good, or when the doctor writes, prognosis poor. We can develop our resume, but if we don't grow our soul and nurture our inner life, we won't have what we need when we need it the most. Now, I know something about this because I'm a person that people come to when their life gets turned upside down. Martha Nussbaum writes, our society is very outward looking, very taken up with the latest new object, the latest piece of gossip, the latest opportunity for self-assertion, self-promotion, and status. But we all begin our lives as helpless babies, dependent on others for comfort, food, and survival. And even though we develop a degree of mastery and independence, we always remain alarmingly incomplete. We are always dependent on others and on this uncertain world for whatever we can achieve. Along the way, we encounter illness, loss, and aging. And we're not well prepared for these inevitable events by a culture that directs us to think of external things only and to measure ourselves in terms of our possessions. She encourages us as we grow older to encounter more and more complex stories in literature and film, in visual arts, in music and poetry that give us a richer, more subtle grasp of what it means to be human, and to help us to nurture our inner life. She encourages us as we grow, as we get older, to read more stories, to listen to more music, to think about what these stories of other people who we encounter, what do they mean for our life and for the lives of those we love? So today, I want to share with you a poem by Galloway Cannell called The Bear. It is the story of an Eskimo hunting a bear, but it's really the story of inner transformation. In the poem, he's hunting a bear, whereas you and I might be searching for our inner truth, for our center, for our core, for the strength of our spirit. Whatever you call it, I'm talking about that which without it, we would freeze to death. In the first few verses, he describes the traditional Eskimo method of bear hunting. He sharpens the bone of a wolf on both ends, and he covers the entire bone with frozen animal fat to attract the bear. And this technique involves the bear eating the bone, and then when the food on the ends thaws, the sharp edges cut into the bear's inside. And then the Eskimo follows the trail of blood on the snow until the bear dies. It's a bit of a gory process, so be ready for that. But remember, it's not really about a bear, it's about your soul. Hear the Eskimo. In late winter, I sometimes glimpse bits of steam coming up from some fault in the old snow. And I bend close and see it is lung-colored, and I put down my nose and know the chilly, enduring odor of bear. I take a wolf's rib and whittle it sharp on both ends and coil it up and freeze it in blubber and place it out on the fairway of the bears. And when it has vanished, I move out on the bear tracks, roaming in circles until I come to the first tentative dark splash on the earth. And I set out running, following the splashes of blood, wandering over the world. At the cut, gashed resting place, I stop and rest. At the crawl marks, where he lay out on his belly to overpass some stretch of botchy ice, I lie out, dragging myself forward by bear knives in my fists. Now, I want us to stop here momentarily. Let us just say that attracting the bear is the easy part. Following the bear proves to be challenging. By the end of these first verses, the Eskimo is tracking the bear over sheets of ice, the bear on its stomach, pulling itself over the cold, slick, unforgiving terrain with its claws. And the Eskimo must do the same, dragging himself on his belly, using his knives and his fists to pull himself forward. In life, often catching a thing is the easiest part. Getting the job, attracting the girl or the guy might seem hard at the time, but it's only the first and the easiest part. Saying I do doesn't mean you can. It means you want to. Getting the job or the promotion doesn't mean you have succeeded. It means that you're being given the opportunity to succeed. Taking vows or getting baptized or joining a church, that doesn't mean that you've made it or arrived. It means that you've just begun a new phase in your journey. The poem continues. On the third day, I begin to starve. At nightfall, I bend down as I knew I would at a turd sopped in blood and hesitate and pick it up and thrust it in my mouth and gnash it down and rise and go on running. Yes, you heard it right. He becomes so desperate and hungry that he does what he swore he would never do. He eats a blessed bear turd in order to survive. Sometimes life pushes us to do a thing we swore we would never do. In the midst of life's challenges, even someone who says they would never might find themselves joining a church, visiting a therapist, borrowing money, calling a psychic or a shaman, or going to see an alternative or experimental healer. Or if you're an alternative person, going to see a Western doctor. You might find yourself trying to be a vegan or quitting a well-paying job. You may have said that you would never, but find yourself getting married or getting divorced or moving away from home or changing your religion or having a child or an abortion or groveling to someone you swore you would never ask for help. You might find yourself praying to a God that you had disowned, or stopping praying to a God that you thought you would never forsake. You might even accept help from a stranger or a foe, or lie, or cheat, or steal. You might tell a secret that you said you'd always protect, or betray a confidence. You might not show up for someone you love when they need you. Life can put us in a position where we find ourselves doing the unthinkable, or something that we swore we would never, ever do. Writer Mark Nepo says that in the midst of battling cancer, he, a Jew, did what he committed never to do. He kneeled and bowed before a Catholic healer, a major heresy in Judaism to bow down to anyone but God. But he was desperate. He says that even though these acts can cause us to see ourselves differently, it also shows our resilience, the complexity of being alive. It shows our willingness to change and be changed, to adapt, and to survive. The poem continues with the death of the bear. On the seventh day, 7 days, living by now on bear blood alone, I can see his upturned carcass far out ahead, a scraggled, steamy hulk, the heavy fur rifling in the wind. I come up to him and stare at the narrow-spaced, petty eyes, the dismayed face, laid back on the shoulder, the nostrils flared, catching perhaps the first taint of me as he died. I hack a ravine in his thigh and eat and drink and tear him down his whole length and open him and climb in and close him up after me against the wind and sleep and dream. After 7 grueling days without rest or food, in freezing temperatures, tracking the bear without shelter or comforts, he finally eats. And then he climbs inside the gutted carcass. And in the warmth and protection from the elements, he finally sleeps and even dreams. It reminds us that as we discover new truths, new parts of ourself, a new belief, a new identity, we need to put it on, wear it, inhabit it for a while. This is the inner work. Yes, we act and we move in the world out here, but there's a journey going on inside us as well, all along. That's happening on the inner landscape, where we wrestle with feelings of anger and fear, shame, betrayal, inadequacy, hope, compassion, heartbreak, and wonder. On the outside, my skin is wrinkling and changing. How is this impacting me on the inside? What am I telling myself about what's happening and who I am and what it means to me? How is this impacting that inner walk? If in the external world I broke a vow, if I failed to live up to my values, what am I telling myself about myself in those moments of reflection in the dark of night or when I'm all alone? How am I wearing this new reality on the inside? Or am I just going from thing to avoid thinking about it? Now, you may not ever have had to survive winter in an Arctic tundra, but how do you navigate the winters of your soul? The last verse ends, "The rest of my days I spend wandering, wondering, what, anyway, was that sticky infusion, that rank flavor of blood, that poetry by which I lived?" The Eskimo spends the rest of his days contemplating the meaning of doing something he said he would never do. The poet is assuring us that whatever we find ourselves doing that we thought or swore we would not, making sense of it is in effect the poetry in which we live. This is the inner life. This is the stuff of the soul. So as you enter a new year, consider these questions from Mark Nepo. Is there something that you have done that you vowed you would never do? Did you consider this to be a triumph or a failure? What caused you to do it? Was it courage, necessity, or was it a mistake? How has your life changed for this unexpected experience? This, dear one, is the work of your inner life, your soul work. You don't have to be religious to grow your soul and to nurture your spirit. However, it helps to have a supportive and a wise community with which to hunt bears or to process the experience afterwards. In the year ahead, my wish for you is that you resolve not to achieve only external goals, but that you put the right amount of attention into your inner journey. Now, I realize that the poem I chose to share was kind of gory in some of its imagery, and I hope that that helps you to remember the message of today. But before we end, let me cleanse our palates with my all-time favorite poem by Galway Kinnell. This one is not about a bear, it's about a female pig. But of course, it's not about a female pig, it's about you and how absolutely lovely you are. It's titled St. Francis and the Sow. The bud stands for all things, even for those things that don't flower. For everything flowers from within of self-blessing. Though sometimes it's necessary to reteach a thing its loveliness, to put a hand on its brow of the flower and retell it in words and in touch, it is lovely, until it flowers again from within of self-blessing. As St. Francis put his hand on the creased forehead of the sow and told her in words and in touch, blessings of earth on the sow, and the sow began remembering all down her thick length, from the earthen snout all the way through the fodder and slops to the spiritual curl of the tail, from the hard spininess spiked out from the spine, down through the great broken heart, to the sheer blue milken dreaminess spurting and shuddering from the 14 teats into the 14 mouths, suckling and blowing beneath them. The long, perfect loveliness of sow. And on this New Year's Eve, I offer my blessing upon the perfect loveliness of you. I love you. Happy New Year.